Good evening, friends. I first want to try to erase the confusion that I brought in. I sent an email to probably all of you who are watching that we would end tonight at 9:45, but that was a little bit incorrect. We'll be ending at 9:30 at the time we normally end at. And today's topic is, why do devotees fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles, yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing with his death the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This, he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and kept the purse, and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it, indeed fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the second chapter, Sri Krishna states, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, or the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty. And when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramahansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. We're going to begin our discussion this evening with a story from Paramahansa Yogananda. This story is called The Man Who Thought He Was Proof Against Temptation. Mr. J was a confirmed drunkard, making a nuisance of himself to his family and neighbors. He met a saint and took the vow to abstain from drinking. He asked his servants to hide his costly wine in locked boxes and to keep the key, and instructed them to serve the liquor to his friends only. Everything went along all right with Mr. J for some time because of his joy and the power of a new resolution against drink. For a while he did not feel the unseen, gripping lure of the liquor tempting habit. As time went on and he felt himself proof against liquor temptation, he asked his servants to leave the key of the wine room with him, so that he could serve the red liquid to his friends himself. Feeling further mental security, he thought it was too much bother to go to the cellar to get liquor for his friends, so he kept some wine bottles hidden in the parlor. After a few days, Mr. J thought, since I am proof against liquor, let me look at the sparkling red wine in the bottle on the table. Every day, he looked at the bottle. Then he thought, since I am absolutely proof against the temptation, I may just as well smell it. This went on for a few days. Then he thought, since I no longer care for liquor, I will take a mouthful of wine, taste it, and then spit it out. He did this. Then he thought, since I am so strong and so proof against liquor, there will be no harm if I drink once and just swallow just a little. After that he thought, since I've conquered the liquor habit, let me take only one gulp of wine at a time, as many times as my unenslaved will desires. Then he found that he got drunk and kept on being helplessly drunk every day in spite of his will, just as he had before. This story shows how, number one, the liquor drinking habit was put down temporarily by the strong resolution to conquer. Number two, it shows how Mr. J failed to realize that his resolution against liquor had not had enough time to ripen into good habit. Every devotee should remember that it takes from 5 to 8 years to substitute a good habit for a strong habit. Before the strong habit is formed, the devotee must stay away from his evil habit-forming environment or actions. As was proven by the way Mr. J disregarded this law, brought his wine bottle near him, and gradually reawakened the memory of the drinking habit. Therefore, in preventing the nourishment of bad habits, one must get away from evil surroundings, and above all, one must never bring evil thoughts into the mind. The latter causes the former and is more dangerous. Let me just add a few words here. The latter, being the evil thoughts in the mind, causes the former, then we get attracted to evil surroundings. Number three, then again, Mr. J not only forgot that he should not have brought liquor so near him, but he also forgot that he should have recognized the psychological weapons which his bad habit used to defeat his good resolution. Number four, the liquor habit remained unseen, hidden in his subconscious mind, secretly sending out armed spies of desire and pleasing thoughts of taste to prepare the way for the reinvasion of the liquor habit, which was to come back again and usurp the body and soul of Mr. J. If you have a tendency to live on the misery-producing material plane, learn to stay away from tempting environments outside and to cast out thoughts of temptation from within. Surround yourself with the right kind of environment and keep your mind filled with the kind of thoughts which will produce the effect that you desire. This is a fun story because even though it somewhat seems a little bit silly, delusion does work like that we start thinking, well, I've been away from this bad habit for so long, so now I'm sure that I can, handle a little bit more of whatever environment. And one step at a time, slowly, Maya's just over there doing push-ups in the dark, but we can't see, getting stronger and stronger, and then one day, suddenly, slowly it slips in and slowly starts grasping you and seizes you, and you say, what happened? And so, number one, environment is stronger than willpower. That if you want to get over the habit of drinking alcohol, don't go to places where alcohol is served. Don't associate with friends who drink alcohol. And you might think, but this is my best friend. I've known him since I was 4 years old, and even though he's not done drinking, I am done drinking, but he's still my friend. I've known him for so long. Even still, it might be better to take some time away and get some distance and some separation. And later on, you will probably find that you'll want different friends, that you'll want friends who share your ideals, who are on the spiritual path and who are seeking God. But it's a very important thing to have friends who are going in the same direction as you. All of us are constantly exerting magnetic influence on one another. And hopefully you are a type of person that's trying to uplift everyone. Hopefully you're not a person who's trying to pull people down. But if you're having negative thoughts about people, even though you might not mean it, and you smile sincerely, you're pulling them down. So, ultimately, this whole war, and the reason why devotees fall, is because ultimately this is all a mental battle. That everything you see in your five senses isn't as real as you think it is. That it's just a dream. And it's hard to escape because it's a dream within a dream. The Master said, on a little piece of thought rests the cosmic lot. Rub that thought away, the entire universe away. So all of this is a dream in the Creator's mind, but we don't get to that state of realization until our mind becomes very calm. And our mind doesn't become very calm until we start learning how to fight the battle of Kurukshetra within, and realize that we have certain mental tendencies that go in the right direction and certain mental tendencies that go in the wrong direction. And here's where it gets very fascinating, is that even those tendencies, they group together, because we're talking about magnetism here, as we're talking about thought, and that there's leaders in each one of those tendency towns, you could say. Really, you are a nation in itself, and you could think that in that nation, in this analogy, that each human being represents a thought. And so you, in your ego, which can be a good thing, are the leader of this entire nation. And you see that people group together in towns, well, certain tendencies, mental tendencies group together also. And so we want to learn how to work with the good cities and towns and encourage our good positive thoughts. And we do that by learning how to center our energy in the chakras and make sure that the chakras that are sending the energy up, that these cerebrospinal centers, as Master called them, that we have to learn to become king of each one of those 5 regions, he called them. And each one of those are subservient to the ego. And if we're using our ego properly, that we learn how to control those 5 Pandavas in this war. And their strength is immeasurable. Even though they are small in number, only 5, compared to all of these towns and cities with all of these thoughts, good and bad, that when you get a true leader in there, like a Pandava, that he can take over many cities and have them all go in the same direction, in this good direction. An interesting thing that just comes into my mind as we're talking about this, that it's in the Christian Bible, I've said it before in these webinars, but he who rules himself is mightier than he who rules the city. It's a fascinating, fascinating thing. That the yogi who's sitting there quietly and has become completely in charge of himself, in charge of his physical body, so he moves it when he wants it to move, he sets it still for many hours if he wants, and the yogi who then has become in charge of his mind, that he's become the true leader in this world, that he knows how to lead those 5 Pandavas and lead them back home, because he knows that then in his ego, that he's no longer even that ego, he's not the leader. He knows that he's just directing the consciousness of those 5 centers back towards Krishna here. And so the ego then eventually dissolves into the sea and melts into the sea and realizes that it was always God who was doing everything. So back to this mental war, it gets a little tough when we start realizing how things actually work, when we realize that it's thoughts that govern energy and energy that governs matter. But when we realize that the soul stands above all of that and that that's who we truly are, then we don't have to make it seem too tough, because ultimately it's God who's doing everything, and that we just want to constantly be asking God, how can we work in harmony with God? How can we fall in line with the plan? Another thing that when we're talking about how do devotees fall, well, you know, God kind of designed it that way, that he made it so that we'll make mistakes, and then we learn those lessons, and then we do better. I was talking about this just the other day, but I was just pondering on how beautiful it is that God gives each one of us the lessons that we need when we need them. That had he given you the really toughest lesson of your life earlier on when you weren't ready for it, it would have destroyed you. But he didn't. He gave it to you at the time when you needed it, when you would rise above it, and then get stronger and realize that I can handle that and it's okay. And then he's slowly, slowly making you stronger and stronger until you realize who you truly are, until you realize that you do have the strength to fight this mental battle, and that you have the strength to be able to keep your mind positive at all times. And then ultimately, you have the strength of the mental strength to keep your mind on God at all times. That's the true battle here, that we're trying. Scriptures say that if we can keep our mind on God for 24 hours, that we're liberated. And so it's worth trying, and of course slowly we're going to grow into that gradually, but it's a very joyful thing to grow into that gradually. So The reading was about Judas. And Judas is a fascinating character to contemplate because he was one of Christ's 12 closest disciples. And for Christ to take him that close meant that not only did he have very good karma, as Swami Kriyananda says he was a prophet, however we will define those words, and he must have known on some level on the inside the greatness of Christ. And yet, here's what I've been told is what happened in Judas's mind, that he saw Christ doing all of these miracles all over the place, feeding 5,000 people with one loaf of bread and one, whatever the case was, and bringing people back from the dead, healing people with crazy diseases, walking on the water, and he realized this is the man, that he can do absolutely whatever he wants. And so when Judas got tempted by the money, that he thought, I'll take the money. What does it matter? Even if I betray him, he's king of the entire universe. He'll just go over to the rulers, show them that he's king, and then the whole kingdom will get in order because we'll have a true king in place. It's a perfect plan. What's the problem? And that's how devotees fall. That the mind starts justifying things where your heart's going, that's maybe not a little right. And we have to learn how to listen to the heart very, very sensitively. Anyway, back to Judas. So then they came and they took Jesus away, and then Judas must have been thinking, okay, any time now he's going to just display his powers and this is going to turn out okay. And as they're taking away to the cross, he must have been thinking, okay, any time now, it's going to happen. He's going to show who he truly is. And boy, Judas must have obviously felt so bad when he was crucified and killed. But even still, maybe Judas was thinking, well, he revived other people from the dead. Maybe he'll just revive himself, which actually, interestingly, he ultimately did. However, before Christ did that, Judas saw that Christ was dead, didn't look like he was coming back, and then so Judas felt so bad about it, he hung himself and committed suicide, which Paramahansa Yogananda said was the wrong thing for him to do. We all make mistakes, and Paramahansa Yogananda said that Judas should have just gone off into seclusion for the rest of his life and meditated and tried to do penance for that horrible act the best he could in seclusion and in meditation. Anyways, in telling this story in this way, I never thought about the fact that Christ did come back. Look how close Judas actually was in tune with what was really going on. If he hadn't freaked out, he would have seen that Christ did come back. He still would have felt bad, obviously, but he would have known that his intuition was just a little bit off. And anyway, the point of this whole thing is our discrimination becomes weakened by desires. We have to remove desires, and then our discrimination will get stronger and stronger, and ultimately our discrimination doesn't become our discrimination at all. It becomes God's discrimination. He tells us what he wants us to do and what he doesn't want us to do. We can completely hear his voice on the inside, and it doesn't turn us into mindless slaves and servants of God just walking around like zombies. When we give our lives to God, we become who we truly are, and each one of us is uniquely ourselves and a beautiful, beautiful soul that was meant to express who you truly are. So it's a wonderful thing to give our lives to God. I have one more reading. I don't know how long it's going to take, but this is also a fun one. It's also by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it also is on this topic of the mental war and of how devotees fall. So this one is called Monkey Consciousness. And this is Tej Bahadur, a young businessman in India, took great pains and spent considerable of his hard-earned money in going to London to confirm his business transactions. He had harbored within himself an extraordinary desire and constant caution about the art of business economy. No matter how he cut down his overhead, he was never satisfied and constantly thought of numerous fantastic schemes for saving money. Though he was a wealthy businessman, he once brooded over the idea of going to London by working his own way as a sailor. Also, he thought of inventing oil-run, inexpensive seaplanes in order to go to London more economically. Tej Bahadur often indulged in wild fantasies too, and wondered why God had not made him fast-moving, like the electricity, which traverses vast tracts of space during the twinkling of an eye. while, in his imagination, he was bemoaning the fact that he was not speedy like the lightning, a friend of his, who knew all about his strange plans of economy, came scurrying toward him and poured forth a volley of excited words. Tej Bahadur, come to the banks of the river Ganges, he said. I have found a man who can levitate himself and walk on water, and who is willing to teach the method to a worthy student. Listening attentively, the wealthy Tej Bahadur was greatly impressed with this new idea and said to himself, thank God for sending me a levitating tutor. I guess I will ask him to teach me levitation, and that will save me a lot of money which I annually spend on my European business trips. Thinking this, he wended his way toward the riverbank, where the master had temporarily encamped himself. The businessman requested the master to teach him levitation, whereupon the latter agreed to do so and started giving him a lesson. The master told Tej Bahadur gently, son, every night, dim the light in your bedroom, lock the doors, and sit erect on a straight chair facing the east, with eyes closed, and mentally chant the holy word of the cosmic vibration, Om, for an hour. And then, at the end of 1 month, you will be able to race over the waters. As the businessman thanked the master for the lesson and was about to return home, inwardly wondering about the extreme simplicity of the lesson, he was called back by the master and was cautioned gently further. Son, I forgot to tell you something about the technique of levitation. While you are mentally chanting Om and are concentrating, be sure not to think of a monkey. That is simple, said the businessman. Of course I won't think of a monkey. And after saluting the saint, he returned home. Evening came fast on the wings of time, and found Tej Bahadur soon closing the windows, pulling down the shades, and sitting in a straight chair in his bedroom to practice the technique of levitation. No sooner had he done so than the first thought that struck him like a thunderbolt was, I must not think of a monkey. 2 minutes passed, and several times he warned himself inwardly, I must not think of a monkey. When 10 minutes had passed, he had thought of all the different kinds of monkeys in South America, India, Africa, Sumatra, and still even other places. He was furious. He willed himself to banish the thoughts about monkeys, which in fast-moving procession were leaping through the window of his helpless mind. At the end of an hour, he found himself thinking of nothing but monkeys. With each succeeding day, he meditated faithfully, but to his great annoyance, he found that he was only frantically trying not to think of millions of monkeys, which were jumping into his mind. After a month's concentration upon the forbidden monkeys, the businessman, beside himself with rage and helpless fury, raced back to the master and exclaimed loudly, Master, take back your lesson on levitation. I don't want to learn to walk on the water. You have taught me to meditate upon monkeys instead of how to levitate. You have developed and increased the monkey consciousness in me. Ha, 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 laughed the saint merrily, and advised him in a voice like the soothing dew. Son, I tried to show you how untrained and slavish your mental state of concentration is. Unless you learn to make your mind obey you, you cannot achieve any success, not to speak of the difficult art of attaining the power of levitation. First learn to attain mental control, then use that power to achieve small things. And when you are able to do that, try that on bigger and bigger achievements, until your inner power becomes developed enough to levitate you, or to accomplish even greater spiritual miracles. It's been a wonderful evening together. I look forward to next